Omaha. Omaha Beach. That length of shore stained with blood, sweat, and echoes of war that took place that day. See, the year was 1944, and on June 6th, the viciousness became real for the brave men that fought that day. Machine guns pierced holes, broke limbs, and tore flesh from muscle and bones. There was so much pain. Yes, real pain inflicted on real people, tasked with the real mission to bring fire to Nazi evil. They were so damn brave. The sand shook beneath their boots. See, the Nazis were dug in, and the machine gun fire was soon accompanied by the explosion of Nazi mortars. It was no earthquake. Amidst the fire, the sheer carnage, the mayhem, not once did these men waver. Corporal Pinder was one of these men, M1 Garand in hand, he took the beach. His dedication to duty, selfless service, and courage saved lives and inspired, costing him his life that day. Laying his life on the line, going beyond the call of duty, Pinder earned the Medal of Honor for his actions. Actions amidst the hell, the very true hell on Bloody Omaha. This is his story. Welcome to Project Memoir. This is episode 1 of A Medal of Honor Story, a series set to tell the stories of posthumous recipients of the U.S. military's highest decoration, the Medal of Honor. Please join us in remembering the brave that ferociously held the line. May they never be forgotten. It is time now for the story of John Joseph Pinder, Jr. There was a man born on the 4th of June in a suburb outside of Pittsburgh. The year was 1912, and as this man grew, Pittsburgh and the surrounding area were set deep in the steel game. The sound of industrialized machine shops echoed through the dirty streets of the city. The smell of grease and automobile exhaust constantly filled the air, but it wasn't the worst. They would soon be replaced by the familiar smell of gun smoke and moonshine. This man was raised in the 20s, a time when the role models came in the form of bootleggers and gangsters, a time when men did men's work, a time when sometimes men did the man's work, but regardless, every man worked. What was this man's name, you ask? Well, it was Pinder. Pinder with the first name John, and John Joseph Pinder, Jr. was the firstborn son of Laura and John Sr. After Junior, they would go on to have his sister Martha and their youngest, his brother Harold. Fast forward to 1931. Pinder is attending Butler High School where he is getting ready to graduate. But Pinder isn't your average Joe. See, ever since his youth, Pinder recognized that recognition seldom came without hard work. So he worked hard. So hard that on graduation day he was walking across the stage valedictorian of his class. A bright kid. Maybe he picked up his work ethic from his father. See, his father worked sun up to sundown forming iron in a dusty mill, but it could have been the gangsters. Whoever it was, they put a fire in Pinder that burned bright in the black of both eyes. So what's next? Well, like many his age, he developed a love for America's sport, baseball. But he was good. So good that he would start pitching for the Butler Indians only a couple years out of high school. The Indians were a minor league, but a pro team. From 1935 to 41, Pinder would build a reputation for his work ethic within the league. By this time, he had grown to a stocky young pitcher with a mean arm. See, he put fear in other clubs and was thought by many to have a long and bright future in the game, but it would have to wait. It was the January of 42 when Pinder would have to answer the call. A call that came to many men like him and would ultimately define their entire generation. The greatest generation. Among the masses of men, Pinder would find himself training for the World War at Fort Benning, Georgia. His baseball uniform was now that of a GI. His cleats were now combat boots and his bat was replaced with the mighty M1 Garand. The 30-06 with an 8-shot clip and a resting weight of about 9 pounds. With this rifle, a bucket of sweat, a determined mind, Pinder would take shape as an instrument of war. An instrument so designed to sing among symphonies of screams of machine gun fire they hold the line, but he wasn't there yet. See, he was assigned to headquarters of the 16th Infantry. The 16th was part of the 1st ID that would ultimately cement its name in history as the Big Red One. Now him and his unit were stuffed on a steel ship and sent across the Atlantic Ocean. England was the staging ground. It was a patch of friendly soil packed with Allied forces that were itching to get a piece. From here, operations were planned and missions were launched to pump fear in the heart of Nazis. It was also from here that Pinder's unit was given their first mission, Operation Torch. He would be among the first to engage in a combat amphibious assault along the shores of French Morocco. When they landed, the northern shores of Africa were home to much lighter resistance than they expected, but the fighting would soon come. Pinder and the 16th were then told to head to the shores of the Italian island named Sicily. Unlike Torch, this operation offered these men the combat they'd been expecting. After assaulting the beaches, the men of the 16th made their way through the mighty mountains. It was here, on this high ground, that they would find and bring the heaviest fighting on the island. Pinder was tasked to an observation post to gain intelligence on enemy forces. Separated from most of the unit, he was to report observations while maintaining a concealed position. The unit was to capture an objective, and the information reported was critical to success. But it wasn't that easy. What happened next drew the culmination of lifelong devotion to responsibility and hard work. See, all of a sudden, Pinder found himself at an extremely exposed position under severe artillery and mortar attack. Now, as things exploded around him, instead of hiding or running, he chose to remain exposed and man the post. This unthinkable feat of courage allowed him to transmit info critical to the objective and its success. His heroic devotion to duty did not remain unnoticed, as it ultimately led to accomplishment of the mission. This feat led his leaders to put in for a request that a Bronze Star be awarded to Corporal Pinder for his actions. Though delivered after his death, the award would be presented representing the character of this man. As Pinder and the 16th returned to England in November of 43, their heads held a little higher than before. They have fought for nearly a year, stood tough and battle-hardened, and I can imagine were thirsty for Nazi blood. Their chance was coming. They started to train for D-Day, another amphibious assault designed to punch Hitler right in his mouth. But during this D-Day train-up, Pinder received word that Harold was shot down out of the sky. Remember Harold? Harold was Pinder's brother, the youngest of the 3 siblings, who ended up a fighting man himself. Now, Harold left for the Air Force just 2 days after his brother up and left for the Army in 42. Harold learned to rule the sky. He became a first lieutenant, a lethal bomber pilot, delivering justice from above. He served in the 44th Bomb Group, stationed right there in England, neighboring his older brother while at war. While conducting an air raid, Harold would meet less fortune and find himself shot down over Nazi Europe. Though stated to be MIA, there's a slim chance of someone surviving such an event, so the news upset many. But Pinder remained hopeful, ensuring his family that if anyone could survive, it would be Harold. And he was right. Harold had survived the crash landing, linked up with the Belgian resistance, and evaded Germans' capture for 3 months. Eventually he'd be caught. He was made a prisoner of war and locked up to rot in a Nazi camp. But he would make it through. He lived to see the end of the war and returned home, solidifying the strength of Pinder's bloodline. Now, while Pinder is in training, it's important to set the stage for what led to the events that took place. Put a pause on Corporal Pinder. We'll let him keep up his training while we go ahead and proceed setting the stage. You see, Hitler knew the Allies were massing over in Britain and eventually were coming to take his soul. So, Hitler devised a plan to strengthen up his defenses by building up the coastline from Spain up to the Arctic, known as the Atlantic Wall. Unlike a conventional wall, it was manufactured in mind to keep the Allies off the shore. It consisted of interlocking bunkers with heavy cement pillboxes overlooking the beaches and armed up to the teeth. The beaches were filled with mines, while also lined with obstacles to cause major carnage should anyone make it to shore. Large naval guns were placed in strategic locations to cover specific sectors, all designed to ward off any attack. The Nazis were dug in. Fortified fighting positions manned 24/7 along 1,600 miles of coast. Over 2 years was spent sealing off the western flank in preparation for an offensive the Allies were sure to launch. The most fortified position along this length of defenses laid in the French region of Pas-de-Calais. See, since the Allies were massed in England, a logical point of attack would be the region that was the closest overall distance. Insert Pas-de-Calais. See, the English Channel is at a narrow, thus requiring the Allies less fuel time and logistics to make a move. Well, of course, this wasn't the plan, but we sure made them think it. With the brilliant execution of Bodyguard. More on that later. See, the Allies knew that if the Nazis knew where the Allies' invasion was going to be, it'd be detrimental. If the Nazis had the chance to strengthen up their defenses at Allied planned positions, there was no chance. So the Allies amassed an effort of slick schemes and deceit designed to prevent Nazis from doing just that. It was called Operation Bodyguard. The goal of Bodyguard was to fool the foolish Nazis to thinking the invasion could come at any location along the wall. This caused Nazi confusion, forcing them to balance their forces along the coast. How did the Allies do this? Well, they caught spies for the Germans among them, flipped them to double agents, and had them report information back to the Fuhrer. Now, as the invasion grew closer, the importance of keeping the secret drove the Allies to continue to level up. So they chose Pas-de-Calais to be their phony objective and focused their efforts on Nazis taking the bait. If the Allies were to hit this region of France, they would most likely be prepping and staging in or around the southeast England locations. So they got him being the general most feared by the Nazis, Patton. See, Patton had got a name introducing Nazis to pain, and his leadership was respected all around. So they brought him to southeast England, gave him the situation, and tasked him with making a phantom force. The goal was to make it appear as if the Allies were massing, preparing to launch an assault on Pas-de-Calais. The mastermind instructed construction of phony tanks, aircrafts, and landing vessels to make it appear if it were just that. Fake communications were sent, constant radio transmissions relayed troop and supply movements that never even took place. Now the Nazis would hear this chatter and see what they thought was a buildup of troops taking place in southeast England. They also got news that Patton would be there too, so it had to be Pas-de-Calais that would be hit. They took appropriate action by reinforcing defenses, possibly catching their breath at distant positions along the wall. Leading to D-Day commencing, the Phantom Forces were increasing activity in the region, suggesting an attack. Planes were dropping clouds of dense aluminum shavings that would appear as naval advancements on the radars of our opponents. Fake paratroopers they called Ruperts were dropping along the region, thus further suggesting Pas-de-Calais was the ultimate target. But little did Hitler know, these were fabricated events designed to disguise the intentions of our amphibious assault. Reality took shape of the endless vessels of steel appearing off the coast of the Normandy region of France. These ships were filled with souls of the greatest generation, on the way to deliver a certain death to enemy forces. Operation Overlord, the code name given to the Allied invasion of Nazi-occupied France. The scale would prove massive, with multiple sources suggesting nearly 7,000 U.S. and British ships. To include but not limited to warships, minesweepers, and landing crafts. These vessels were packed full of 160 grand of the Allied forces' toughest men that day. See, the weather led the invasion to get pushed from the 5th to the 6th, which sucked because the sea was rough and many men got sick. But they drove on. See, before dawn, paratroopers got the green light go and the LGOPs brought hell that night. Airborne. The D-Day invasion involved the amphibious taking of 5 different beaches in the Normandy region of France. Each of equal importance, each was given a code name, tasked to a friendly unit on June 6th of 44. The easternmost beach, named Sword, and another named Gold, were both tasked to the Brits, and they would hit them hard. The Canadians were tasked with Juno, where they faced a brutal fight, but drove on they did. The U.S. was tasked with 2 beaches, maybe you've heard their names. They go by Utah and Omaha. See, Utah was the westernmost beach, And the fight did wait there for the fourth ID, but they would succeed. Last but not least, Omaha Beach. Bloody Omaha. This beach was a hard fight where hard men laid it all on the line, fighting for inches that seemed to amount to miles. A lot of these men were from the first ID, the same first ID that was apparent to the 16th, where Pinder earned his stripes among the madness. Pinder. Yes, Pinder, I remember that name. So what was his unit's job on D-Day? Well, the 16th was to assault Omaha Beach, reduce its defenses, and push to the established phase line. Now that's a set stage that provides a snapshot or a glimpse of what was going on during the times leading up to the landings. Now let's get back to Pinder. Happy birthday, Joe. I'm sure it must have echoed in the darkness that morning from someone on the boat. See, June 6th was Pinder's birthday, and that June 6th, before the sun would touch the sky, John Joseph Pinder Jr. would be seasick in a landing craft approaching the shores of France. He turned 32 that morning. 32 years old and a long way from home, there was no time for cake. Omaha Beach. As it appeared in the distance, it was apparent that the air bombardment that superseded their landing had little to no effect. Expecting to see the Nazis weakened and beaches littered with craters, seeing the untouched beaches must have been hell. But hell was yet to come. See, Pinder was packed in the back of a landing craft that was stacked with 32 other men. This landing craft had a big flat ramp, and this ramp made up the entire front of the boat. It was designed to be lowered when they hit the beach, allowing the men inside to exit the craft with speed. In the horizon of Omaha Beach was full of other boats like these that were full of other men like Pinder, eager to start the fight. Now, even as early as 600 yards offshore, anti-tank and small arm fire began to rain on the vessels as they approached. Mortars would explode. It devastated the approach, and many of the men never made it to shore. That morning, the current was strong, so strong it pulled boats off course, but the worst part was getting grounded around 100 yards offshore. With water that's neck high and 100 yards to the beach, can you even imagine the situation these men were in? As the beach got closer, the sounds of war got louder. Pinder's role was to assist with establishing a key line of communication, allowing a voice to be heard from the beach. He was kitted out with his combat load, a vital radio, and various communication equipment. The men on Pinder's boat were huddled together, sick, wet, and pissed off, swearing to raise hell when off the boat. They were getting closer. Enemy machine guns were opening up, the fire beating off the ramp, all while the mortars continued exploding. It was getting louder. In an event of misfortune, one exploding mortar would tear holes in the side of Pinder's boat. It was starting to sink. Chaos began erupting, men were badly wounded, and screams now accompanied machine gun fire. Still 100 yards offshore, some men chose to throw themselves over the side of the boat, but with water knee to neck deep and deeper, the weight of their equipment made drowning the fate of many there. What now? Witnessing all the carnage, in the midst of all the screaming, Pinder knew he had to get to the beach. Now when the ramp dropped, it must have been a signal to Nazi gunners to open up, as pinpointed fire filled the gap. Introduced to accurate fire, most of the 32 men were wounded or already lost their life. But Pinder didn't fold. See, he had been tested before, and though that day was the longest day, he knew there was a job that needed done. He placed the radio on his shoulder and made his way down the ramp to enter the waist-deep water and hit the beach. The beach was a football field away. Wading through the water, a yard or two from the boat, another mortar exploded around him. He was hit. Pinder was hit several times by hot metal, the worst being the one that hit him right in the face. See, this shrapnel hit him hard in the left side of his face, clearly leaving him gravely injured. The left side of his face was nearly cut off completely, as it now was just hanging by only a piece of flesh. But he didn't stop, though. In one hand he held the radio, and in the other hand, the left side of his face. Now with his two hands full, his two legs continued to pull him closer to shore. He was getting tired, but he had a big heart. With a big heart and steel balls, he did make it to shore, successfully delivering his radio. But he didn't stop there. Pinder dropped the radio with his men, refused medical attention, determined to head back into the surf. Instead of seeking cover provided, he moved back into the fire, all the way back down to the water's edge. There, amidst the screams, machine gun fire, and blood-stained sand, Pinder was determined to salvage radio equipment. He would make 3 trips into heavy enemy fire, gathering vital equipment, including a second working radio. It was during his 3rd trip that the machine gun fire would finally catch him. He suffered wounds to both legs, yet still was able to make it back to his men. Wait, did I mention that since he left the boat, there was 100 yards from this beach, he'd been holding his face together with his hand? Okay, now back with his men, growing weak from loss of blood, Pinder must start thinking about himself. He does not. Still refusing the medic, remaining exposed to fire, he was now assisting in setting up the vital communications. And the comms were established. It was during this selfless feat, this dedication to duty, when Pinder would suffer a fatal wound. Pinder didn't stop there, though. See, the men with whom he served witnessed the lengths he'd went, and the lengths he'd went inspired the fight in them all. This inspiration by Pinder and men like Pinder would light fire in the Allies during the war. And because of feats like this, the Nazis would meet their maker and the Allies would claim victory once again. John Joseph Pinder, Jr., thank you. Corporal Pinder's Medal of Honor citation would read, "For conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity above and beyond the call of duty on 6 June 1944 near Colleville-sur-Mer, France. On D-Day, Technician 5th Grade Pinder landed on the coast 100 yards offshore. Under devastating enemy machine gun and artillery fire, which caused severe casualties among the boatload. Carrying a vitally important radio, he struggled towards shore in waist-deep water. Only a few yards from his craft, he was hit by enemy fire and gravely wounded. Technician 5th Grade Pinder never stopped. He made it to shore and delivered the radio. Refusing to take cover afforded or to accept medical attention for his wounds, Technician 5th Grade Pinder, though terribly weakened by loss of blood and in fierce pain, on 3 occasions went into the fire-swept surf to salvage communication equipment. He recovered many vital parts and equipment, including another workable radio. On the 3rd trip, he was again hit, suffering machine gun bullets in both legs. Still, this valiant soldier would not stop for rest or medical attention. Remaining exposed to heavy enemy fire, growing steadily weaker, he aided in establishing the vital radio communication on the beach. While so engaged, this dauntless soldier was hit for the 3rd time and killed. The indomitable courage and personal bravery of Technician 5th Grade Pinder was a magnificent inspiration to the men with whom he served." A lion among lions. He was a man amongst men. See, these stories of greatness deserve to be remembered. It was these actions of these great men that influenced the nation, the land of the free. Thank you everyone for tuning in. It was an honor to tell the story. Sources will be cited in the show notes. I suggest you at least look up a photograph of Corporal Pinder to put a face to the name. Please help us spread these warfighter stories by rating, sharing, or leaving a comment on the show. I am Ellis, and this was a Medal of Honor story. Thank you.